I'm in business for myself. You're always to be in business for yourself. You need somebody that's going to pay you to do work. So it's something.
Good tip.
It's something that you can. It's something that you can. It's something that I can offer.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I am Fine Home Building editor Justin Fink. I will be your host. Today, sitting to my left, seated at the left hand of the editor, is Brian Pontalillo, design editor for Fine Home Building. Say hello, Brian.
Hello.
And Rob is out today, but we have a special guest sitting in his chair, Mr. Ben Brunick from Yankton, South Dakota.
Hello.
Hello. So Ben happens to be on a little tour of the upper East Coast here, visiting some people. What brought this trip on?
I don't know. Just wanted to come out here and get a chance to meet everybody.
Yeah. It's all sort of based on Instagram, right?
It's all, loosely based on Instagram, and wanted to see a number of people that were out here and thought, well, if I can just lump it all together, maybe I can actually do it. So
Yeah.
It's the only way that it was the only way that it would work. I have my wife and my 3 boys. Try to consolidate it all into one trip, and for a short, brief moment, be off the leash and or not. I mean, I thought I'm on a leash, but I mean, it's just
Hope she's not listening.
That's probably a poor way to say it.
We're not editing that out.
All right.
So let's explain why we have Ben Brunick on our podcast. He's not just a guy cruising up
He's not.
the East Coast visiting his Instagram friends. He's much more.
The name will be familiar to some
Sure.
people who have listened to the podcast before. Brian has gone out and shot some articles with Ben. We've talked about him on other podcasts. It's Chalkstone Woodworking or Woodworks?
Chalkstone Woodworking.
Woodworking on Instagram. If you guys are not already following Ben, you got to check him out. He's been working on a pretty epic restoration project and is out in South Dakota. It's more like an institutional building, right? Hold on. We'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to get myself distracted here. I'm easily distracted. But Ben has written an article on restoring windows for us.
Yes.
And that was in a very recent issue, and we have some videos and excellent how-to tutorial there. He also helped contribute to a plaster molding restoration article we just did, and we got a couple more in the works, as well as he was here yesterday shooting some video about job site sharpening. So we are milking Ben for everything he can give us. But we couldn't pass up the opportunity of him passing through the office to snag him for the show and talk shop a little bit, talk about how you got into it, what you're working on now. We know you're building a shop right now, so we want to hear about that.
Yeah.
And so I'll just dig in, Brian.
We're just going to grill Ben for the next hour.
Yeah.
And we're going to start at the beginning.
Well, I appreciate
Birth.
it. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, you're a pretty good talker. I mean, anybody who follows you on Instagram, you often have videos where you're narrating your process. Either somebody is shooting you. I don't know if that's one of your helpers.
Well, it's one of the guys that I work with.
Yeah.
Usually is who's kind enough. I'll hornswoggle anybody I can into running it, because it's a lot better. Then they can actually see what it is that I'm trying to show, instead of it's set up on a tripod and I'm not the prettiest to look at, so it's better. My hands are better than my face is.
When you're freeing yourself up so you're not having to shoot yourself and somebody else is shooting video of you, and you're obviously very comfortable and there's it's really fun to watch Ben talk about his projects, because there's a lot of whatevers and stuff like that worked in there, and I just do this, well, whatever. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that project that you're on right now? Because it was a mental hospital. Yeah, or a women's hospital?
It was the South Dakota. It was a building that was on the campus of the South Dakota State Mental Hospital, the Human Services Center, as they call it there. And it was the Women's Receiving Hospital.
Dating back to...
The building itself was built in 1909. Mm-hmm. And Yeah, it was the women's receiving hospital, so it was the women's asylum.
Yeah.
I suppose. I don't know if that. I mean, that was what it was called. You know, those
Sure.
terminology.
Some of the terms have dropped out of favor, but
yeah.
And they're doing a full scale restoration on this place. It seems. Was it completely neglected for years, or did like whoever was using it? You know, I assume somebody after the hospital was using it for something else, or it was either that or it was sitting vacant, and then you guys came in from and had to kind of demothball it and get it fixed up.
Yeah, it has sat vacant since 1980.
Okay, so it was
you
kind
can
of rotting.
imagine. Yeah, you can imagine. It's an entirely masonry structure.
Okay,
so that's the only reason that it's still around.
Yeah.
You know, if it was a timber framed, it would have been gone a long time ago. But you know, a purely masonry structure can take a lot of water.
Right.
The roof had failed in numerous places.
all the parts that could have failed did fail.
They did. And water came. There was lots of water damage. There were lots of critters living in the building. Windows were out. There's a flat roof section that's between the two wings that come back. That had completely filled in with debris. There were trees growing on that were taller than the roof line.
What was the first of all, this is how I measure it. What did it smell like compared to like? Have you reached the point in the project, because you guys are getting close to wrapping up sometime soon, right? Or are you not close?
Yeah, we're getting close.
You're past halfway.
Yeah, and they're going to start taking occupancy of the building this year. So, but it's one of those projects it'll just go on and on. There's always going to be something that needs to be done.
Sure.
The building needs tuck pointing. It needs various things, but you have to get it to a certain point where they can start using it and utilizing it.
And what was the impetus for the project? What's it going to be used for? Why the restoration?
It's going to be used for the Dakota Territory Museum, and when they change over, I think they'll change names to the Meade Cultural Heritage Center. I think that's the name. But yeah, it's the local museum, and then the third floor will be occupied by Yankton College, the Yankton College alumni. Yankton College used to be the college that was in the middle of the community, and that closed in 1984. But the people that went to school there, they still need to support the alumni, and so that's going up onto the third floor as something else to fill the building out.
Yeah.
But the main thing is the museum, and so the whole project has been fundraising and grants and picking and scratching and
but that's awesome. I mean, you might have seen it when you drove in, because right next door to us we have this old mental hospital campus that's
it's very very similar.
The state sold it to the town, and the town is just kind of going out of the hell with it. And tearing down buildings that they don't want to bother fixing up or can't feasibly fix up, and it's just a shame to watch all of it go down the tubes. But I'm just curious. I always think of like these old buildings, and you're always, especially when it's vacant for whatever 20-something years, have you reached the point in the project? Because I'm sure that day one on that site smelled like dog meat, and I'm wondering, have you reached the point in the project where you walk in there in the morning and you're like, the smell of new materials have started to outweigh the smell of old, dilapidated building that's been mothballed?
Oh yeah.
All right. So you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
I think it probably depends on where you're at in the building too.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah. I mean, we've gotten the front of the building, which is the main part of the building. That's that's been mostly restored. That's the main public space. The back of the area is going to be more curation. And so those spaces don't necessarily have to be finished and weren't ever like ornate. The front of the building was ornate. There's a big marble staircase right as you walk in, and that's the main reason that building is being saved, is because of that big grand marble staircase. There were numerous other buildings on that campus that were just as big and just as grand as that building was, but this building had that staircase.
Yeah.
So
that staircase is something. In fact, it would be great we could put a photo of that on the.
Do you have one?
I have. I don't think I have a photo. I think I have a little video clip of it that we can maybe use. Yeah. But this is the interesting thing. The connection here between this project and Fine Home Building is that this is where you got your education, a hands-on education in window restoration, which is what you wrote about for us.
Right.
Yeah. So I fired.
Can you give us? Can you give us like the 1 minute version of what your scope of work was for this? Like, what was your job? I realize it's a bigger project than just you, but what were you responsible for?
What I was responsible was for the windows. So we're restoring the windows that are existent in the building.
Okay.
And then along with that, building storm windows for all the windows, because they're all single pane, traditional rail and style mutton sash. There's large sash out front. There's a whole bunch of windows out back that are on the wings, and they're large too. They're about 3 feet in width and about 7 feet tall. The smaller windows are, and the large windows are, let's say, 5 feet by 9.5. Mm-hmm. So we made storm windows for those, and the ones that are upstairs are arch topped.
Yeah, those are gorgeous.
They're cool. And those windows, unfortunately, really, they caught a lot of weather. Uh-huh. And for some reason, they were made not very well.
Well, so this leads me to a question before you go into that is, can you define like the level of restoration that you were asked to do? I mean, was it like, were you actually taking the old window sash out, cleaning them up and restoring them like we did in our article and reinstalling them? Or were you just replacing them with windows of the same style? And, what level of authenticity did you have to hit? Like, do you have to glaze them and weatherize them in the same way that you would have in 1909? Or is it, like, oh, yeah, Ben, that's fine. You can use modern materials and do whatever you want. Because I know that varies from project to project. Sure. So what was kind of your directive? Or did you get leeway to do it?
We did it in the way that we did it in the article.
Okay.
So, it was restoration of what was there.
Yeah.
And we were replacing parts that just were too far gone.
Yeah.
To repair. I mean, at some point it becomes it's not going to work.
Right.
There's nothing left to save.
Sure.
But the way that traditional windows are made, they're not glued together. They're through mortise and tenon, and there's a sash pin, which is basically like a headless nail that is driven into the tenon. And if you take all the paint off, which we would do, we would steam them in a makeshift steam box. Mm-hmm. And that would get the glazing off, but it would also bubble all the paint up, and then we could scrape that down. And then once you get that down, then you could see the little spots where those nails were driven in. And you could take a straight punch, not a tapered punch, but a straight punch, and drive that nail down and out the back, grab it with a vice grip, pull it out, and now the joint will come apart.
Oh, cool.
So because of the construction and the way that they were made, you can replace just one part. And it's always the low horizontal part.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's the one that the water comes down and sits on. It eats it away. So that's the one that...
I'm surprised it would be a mortise and tenon and not like a half lap that was pinned or something, or a bridle joint or something.
So, on those windows, there's a thing called a joggle.
Nice.
It's a cool term. I don't know. I enjoy the terminology.
I don't know what joggle is.
So joggle is just at the meeting rail or the check rail. Mm-hmm. Okay, you've got the upper sash and you've got the lower sash. Where the two rails meet, that's usually where you'll see like a lap joint. Well, it's not really a lap joint. It's like a finger joint.
Okay.
Where they come together like this.
Okay.
Because there needs to be the angled piece where the upper and lower sash meet together.
Right. They kind of
they fill up that half-inch space that's in between the windows.
Right. There's two pieces at kind of opposing angles that nest together to seal it. Right.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's and where those two connect.
Right.
And then there's the parting stop. That's the one that's in between them.
Yep.
It takes up the space of the parting stop. And on a lot of windows, or especially on smaller residential, like the windows in my house are this way. It's like a finger joint.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what.
Yeah, it was like a box joint almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Finger joint, box joint.
You guys are both showing your fingers,
but
this is audio, guys.
Well, it's like a finger joint where we match our fingers together. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It would be like the knuckles of a hinge coming together.
Yeah.
They overlap each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
But on
like this.
Yeah.
Just listen, Brian. Watch the video.
But on these and maybe higher end windows, the wood carries on beyond the meeting rail on the stiles.
Okay.
And it usually has a little S curve return. So they're a lot of times they'll be called horns.
Okay.
And what that does, one, it's decorative. But two, it creates a housed. The important thing is it creates a housed mortise.
Okay.
So it's no longer that bridle joint.
Yeah.
It's now a true housed through mortise.
Okay.
And I mean that's for real. I mean it's realistically a better thing. It adds more time. It probably adds more. It certainly adds more expense, I'm sure, to those windows.
Yeah.
But that's.
But it's got that thing that all old structures have, which is the best part about them, is that everything's reversible. You pop that pin out and you just take the parts. You just remove the parts and the window is in pieces again. Like there's no cutting.
It can be repaired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating how we've lost that. But
and so I would make those replacement parts and fix those windows. But when we built the storm windows or the storm sash, built them the same way. There's no glue. It's through mortise and tenon. They're pinned. So 50 years, 75 years, however long from now, they can be, they could be disassembled.
Right.
And the same way with the arch tops. When we made the arch tops, like I said, they were just too far gone, and they were toe-nailed when they were first built. They just weren't made as well as they probably should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's a relative term. They lasted for 100 years too. So
you got a lot out of them.
They ran their lifespan. But we were able to make. I was able to make the new arch tops with mortise and tenon, with correct joinery, so that they could, in the future, it can come apart, because you never know if something's gonna fall on the window, if there's a storm, what have you. If like one mutton gets broken inside that frame, or something falls and hits let's say the meeting rail or the check rail and breaks that, you don't have to junk the whole thing. You can just replace that one part.
Mm-hmm.
Or if like a window gets broken, that's another thing. They're individual
panes of glass,
sash lights.
Yeah.
If one gets broken, you just replace that one. You don't have to replace the whole.
Another benefit of old windows.
Yeah.
Where'd you get the glass from? Were you actually saving some from the previous windows, or did you source old glass? Or
well, we try to save all the glass that we can from the old ones. It's just more interesting glass.
Sure.
It has a history to it. It's from the building, so there's no debate whether it's period correct or not.
Right.
It has air bubbles in it. It has ripples in it. There's imperfections in the glass, and when you see that light on the floor, when you look out the window, you might not pick up on it right away, but for some reason it looks right and it looks old, and it's that distortion that it creates, either the light on the floor or as you look out, you get a little bit of a. It's not crazy fun house.
No, I know what you mean exactly.
But there's a difference to it. So we use that everywhere that we can on the interior, and we use it. We try to also use it in the more public space. So sometimes you're stealing from back areas that maybe are going to be curation.
Sure.
Where it's not going to be a public space. So
that's really smart.
There's not a use in wasting that glass in a spot that it's not going to be.
It's not only smart, but it's traditional. And
best glass goes in the showplaces.
I just learned recently that glass was expensive when in 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when people were building houses. And so when you were building your house, you put the biggest panes of glass, the ones that cost the most amount of money, in the front of the house, not because that was necessarily where you wanted the biggest windows, but to show your wealth.
Ah, yes.
Well, sure.
And that's why,
And maybe this goes without saying, but maybe some people don't know, the reason why we had the divided light windows is because they couldn't get big pieces of glass.
Yeah, you can only make the glass so big.
Well, I guess until maybe you get into like the 20s or so, when you probably started to have 10s or 20s, you started to have bigger pieces of glass. So the Craftsman style is often divided light over one big window, one big light below. So I'm guessing. But the colonial times, forget it. Like you had a divided light because
6/6, even 9/9s. Yeah.
I think it's also for strength. If you have a single pane of glass, like you get to a certain size, and all of a sudden it just becomes. I don't know if the strength, like if you have a big giant window, let's say like one of those arch tops or the rectangular ones that are down below. It's 5 feet wide. It's 6 feet tall. A single sheet of that glass just is kind of an unruly beast to work with. And then if it breaks, man, that you really got a lot of glass coming down.
Yeah.
So you divided it up into individual, and then the window's stronger. Like it can take a larger wind load.
Sure.
Yeah.
Than just one big 1/8-inch piece of glass.
Yeah. And the old windows were made out of what? What kind of wood?
Eastern white pine.
Okay.
That sure seems like what it is. I mean, it's they're a different color. I mean, they're darker than what you think of as Eastern white pine, but they're also 100 years old.
Sure.
That's
They could have been heartwood pine or so that's what you used.
That's what I ended up using.
That's a fun wood to work with.
Oh, it's a wonderful
Smells
wood.
great.
Wonderful wood to work with if you can find it in clear enough stock.
Yeah.
So that's always a battle is getting the clear stock.
Yeah. So you really moved into this job where you had hundreds of windows to work on, rebuild, whatever, and you really tooled up for this job. And I was pretty blown away by some of the equipment that you had.
Yeah, give us the rundown.
So
What's
give us a rundown
shop?
of some of the stuff that was the most useful, but also you have some neat stuff too. So what do you just like them?
Let's start with the power tools.
What's cool?
Sure.
The big power tools.
The big power tools. So when the windows were built originally, the building was built in 1909. So it's not, they weren't made by hand. They were made with power tools. Now they might not have been power tools that were plugged in electrical. They would have been belt driven.
Yep.
And from a power plant, pick your power plant
water
flavor.
Yeah.
Steam.
Sure.
Whatever. But the machinery they were made on machines.
Sure.
And you can see the tooling. You can see in the mortises, you can see the chain mortiser marks. On the tenons, you can see the tenioner marks. So, basically, I just went, all right. Well, what were they using at the time to make those sash, and then try to find that equipment.
But modern day.
No, not necessarily modern day.
Okay.
The machines that I ended up getting, I picked up one machine that was a turn of the century machine.
Yeah.
And that was a New Britain chain mortiser.
New Britain.
Connecticut, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's where Stanley is. That's interesting.
Okay. I think that's
all right. Well, we go with it. We lie on the show. We make stuff up all the time. Yeah. Nobody's even listening to this. It's fine. So you got a chain mortar, sir?
I got a chain mortiser. I actually got 2 chain mortisers.
Of course, there we go.
Because you can't just have one. And so I ended up with 2 chain mortisers that I ended up not using, which is a brilliant move on my part.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be the way to go, but if I had thousands of windows to build, it would be the way to go. But what ended up being the better path was a hollow chisel mortiser.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I bet it was a Powermatic too.
It was a Powermatic.
Yeah.
And it is a Powermatic. It's a wonderful machine. And that's about a 1951 Powermatic.
So
mortiser.
I'm going to stop here and explain this because I'm just realizing I know what it is, but it's a lot of people in our audience are not woodworkers, and that's primarily a woodworking tool. So to explain, it's essentially picture a drill press, but it's got a little more weight behind the head. So it's got like a mechanical downward advantage. And so it's a special drill bit, and it's surrounded by a square bit of sorts.
Square chisel.
It's a square stationary bit that has chisel edges on it. So what's going on is you're plunging down and it's creating sharp 4-sided punches into wood while that drill bit is evacuating the chips from the cut. So you can basically make square holes with a drill press, kind of a deal. But it's a standalone machine, very useful for making mortises.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this one has a left-right traverse, so there's a hand wheel that you can move from left to right, and that gets you from a square to a rectangle.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the one that I've got has got a foot pedal, so you're using your leg to plunge that.
Oh, cool.
Plunge that down,
and you can set up stops.
You can,
so that you can just move it. Start the mortise, move it over, hits a stop.
Yeah, and it's very repeatable, so you can set up one piece after the other, and they're all the same.
You can do that, but that actually ended up being the thing that made it superior for my application, was the fact that I didn't have to set up stops. I could draw lines, and because I can see that chisel, I could drop it right onto the line.
Yeah.
When it was the chain mortiser, the chain's running, you can't see it. You have to have stops. Well, if you've got a storm sash, there's 3 mortises on each side, so that basically ends up being 6 setups of stops, and instead I could just have it as one setup, and I just hit my lines. Mm-hmm. I create one master story stick and just transfer those lines onto all of the sash that are the same size that I'm building, and then I just hit those. Then I just hit the line. I hit the left line. I hit the right line, and then wallow out the material in between.
Yeah.
And then when you're just replacing one part or another part, you can just transfer mortise marks over, and then again just hit the lines. That was the beauty of it, was I didn't have to set up stops.
And how do you cut the tenons? Is that a table saw operation, or you have a tenon or like a router that's set up, a horizontal router, or what?
No, that's the other machine, and that's going to be one that not that many people know of, and it's a machine called a single end tenoner.
This thing's amazing. Wow.
It's a really
You
cool.
didn't let Brian touch any of these machines, did you?
It's a really cool machine, and it's the same vintage as that. As the mortiser, I'd always refer to him as kind of like the old married couple.
Yep.
Because you've got the male portion of the joint and you've got the female portion of the joint, and they really go together.
Yeah.
So what that does is it cuts the tenon on the end of the rail. It cuts both sides of the tenon in one shot, but it also copes the shoulder.
Oh.
Yeah.
So there's.
The hell's it doing that?
There's 2. So there's 2 heads to begin with that are they kind of look like little mini planer heads.
Okay.
But they're on an angle because they're always going. As you pass the piece through, you're going against the grain. The grain's sideways as it's going through. So they're on the cutter is on somewhat of an angle, so it's a shear cut.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Okay, and that's cutting the top and the bottom, and those are you can you set the bottom head and then you set the top head away from the bottom head. Everything is...
Oh, okay. So that way you can adjust the tenon so it's either centered or lower or higher.
Exactly.
And so you're essentially, it would look like you're running a piece across a router table, sort of, where it's perpendicular to the fence. If it's going that motion, right? You're kind of pushing it.
Yeah, I'm pushing the part. The part is horizontal in front of me, and I'm pushing it forward.
Right.
It's on a table system that's on wheels. That's part of the machine,
Yeah.
and it just slides forward through those two tenoning heads.
Yep.
And they cut the tenon.
Yep.
And then after that, there's two coping heads. And on windows, you only use the one coping head, the bottom one.
Yep.
Because that then copes the shoulder, which matches the profile that you end up putting on the rail. You know, you have a glazing rebate or
Yep.
rabbet, depending on
Where you are.
So that's just a flat, and then it comes up, and then there's a little flat that doesn't have the profile, and then you have the profile that you see if you're looking at the window from the inside. There's a little OG.
So that's facing down on the machine, but that's the interior face.
That's the interior
Got
face.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And everything you have to be really cognitive all the time of your faces.
Yeah.
So the faces are always your reference points. That's always the inside. So you're trying to, you're picking the nice side, I suppose. But you're keeping track of that because that's always your reference face. So that is down on the tenoner. It's against the fence on the mortiser. Mm-hmm. It's down on the shaper when you do the profiling. Mm-hmm. Just so you're not relying on being centered. As long as you're always referencing off of the whichever face,
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's centered or not, as long as all the machines is and if the parts all of a sudden are maybe a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner, and you try to make things as consistently as you can. And they are consistent, but you also might as well stack the cards in your favor and knock out those possibilities of indiscrepancies.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not advice that's limited to Ben and his magical mystery machines. This is like if you're building a shelf, pick your reference face, measure off the same thing, orient the pieces the same way through all the machines, and
mark off of that face.
Yeah.
Like if you use a marking gauge
or a combo square or anything.
Yeah, you always reference off of that face. So if you've got a tenon, or a mortise, you don't mark off of one face for this side and then turn it around and go off of the other side. You use two marking gauges.
Yes.
And you mark the inside and the outside, and they're both of those, the marking gauges being referenced off of that face.
It's very like a timber framer's mindset. You establish one clean face, and everything comes off of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's really smart, and that's how you make things look purposeful at the end. Yeah,
yeah. That's hopefully how everything ends up coming out.
Yeah,
is that it all goes together at the end, and you don't have these crazy misalignments.
But I mean, I'm guessing you're having a jointer, a thickness planer, a table saw.
Yeah, the normal things. Just joining everything to begin with to get things straight. That got written on the back of the magazine. I got.
Yeah, we did the Keep Craft Alive column about you. Yep.
Yeah, which was great, and I really appreciate you guys.
Oh yeah, it was
doing that.
You guys,
I was not expecting to.
No, it was fun.
Yeah.
You're doing cool, inspiring work that's beyond the scale of most people. So it's fun to highlight.
But yeah, if you can make things, for those that don't know that, the little quote or whatever it was, if you can make things flat, straight, and square, you're like 95% of the way there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then everything else is just referenced off of those things.
So now when this job is over, I know you're building a new shop. So all these machines are you planning to do more window stuff? Or like, are all these machines going to come back and you're going to save them? Or you're like, well, I'm done with this phase. I never want to see a window again. So I'm going to sell these off and go build tables.
Well, your setup, you could build windows You could build doors
if you wanted to.
Like not just like anyone could. I mean, I could too. But you could build a house full of windows with your setup. Pretty efficient.
Sure.
Does that interest you at all?
Yeah. I mean,
not anymore.
Yeah, it interests me in the fact that it's something that I can offer. You know, I'm in business for myself. You're always to be in business for yourself. You need somebody that's going to pay you to do work. So it's something.
Good tip. Good tip.
It's something that you can. It's something that you can. It's something that I can offer. So yeah, in the future, going forward, if it's something that there's a demand for, then yeah.
You want to give your phone number? You want to give your phone number out?
I'll continue to do it. I'm also doing doors. So that's actually one of my next projects. Is I have there's seven doors that I've got to build for the local congregational church in my hometown. And so that's like next up, and I've got to finish up the Mead building.
Yeah.
The reason for building the shop is that the space that my shop occupies in the building, they want to start renovating.
Yeah.
So I needed a place to move the equipment. I still have a small. It's a historic gas station. It's a really cool building, and that's actually right behind it is where I built my new shop.
Okay.
And that was my shop before. But because of the window work and picking up some more equipment, I was already kind of bursting at the seams in that building. And it's a cool little building that it makes more sense to have it as a leasable space than it does for me to be in that space. So we built a shop behind it because that was another reason that the gas station was attractive for us to purchase, was because there was land behind it that we could build another building that, that was when we bought it, that was one of the things that we were thinking of in the future.
Yeah.
When my wife and I bought it, she's it's always a big part of the.
She's a co-owner.
She is absolutely a co-owner.
Is she making any windows?
What's that?
Is she making any windows?
No, she doesn't make any windows, but she does a whole bunch of other things.
Everything else.
Yeah. She does everything else while I make windows.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the new shop going to look like? It looked. I only saw little snippets of video of it from your Instagram feed. It looked like it was like a metal shell building. Is that correct? Am I got it right?
Yeah, it's
like a pole barn, post barn kind of thing.
It's a pole barn. It was made by Morton. Which is a company that builds those types of buildings. It was more productive for me to have somebody build it. That's not my forte. And
so how does the construction go? Is it a bunch of concrete piers with posts that they then anchor to them? And then they backfill with a slab, and what's the order of events?
Yeah, so it's posts to begin with, and they have a proprietary method. They have these there are these concrete columns that go down. They drill a hole. There's a concrete column that goes down. It has
it's a precast thing.
It's a precast thing, cool. And it has jack screws in it. So that sits down at the bottom of the hole, so they can drill the hole whatever depth. That doesn't really matter, and then they can just turn that precast concrete column, which is basically about the size of a 4x4.
Really?
And they can turn it up or down, to level it, and then they pour concrete around that.
Oh, okay.
And that sets it.
Cool.
Yeah. All the way up, or just around the base of it?
Around the base of it, and probably maybe 8 inches below the surface is where it stops, and then they backfill it.
Okay.
Cool.
Because it's concrete it's a concrete that's going down, and then they fill that hole up with concrete, but they don't fill it all the way up.
Right.
So it's a you don't have that big round concrete looking or that big round piece of concrete at the at the surface.
Yeah.
You just have that concrete pier, I suppose.
Okay, and then
standing up, and then there's metal, like metal flanges that are attached to that concrete pier that are part of it, and then it sandwiches. I think they're 2x8s. I think so. There's 3 of them. So one goes on the outside, one goes in the middle, and one goes on the outside, and then they all get like GRK screwed, and that's probably coming up 16 inches.
Okay,
that's where the timber then begins.
Okay,
and those are the columns that go up, and then the roof trusses then go. Then it's pole barn construction after that.
So how do you seal the connection between the ground and your floor system? Like, is it? I assume there's a slab, right?
It's a slab that's poured after. It's actually poured after the building is constructed.
A pump truck or a chute of some kind.
We had a large door, and it could back the truck up, and then Dave Stevens, who's a friend of mine that did the concrete. He's got his concrete company in town. He used a mud buggy, just filled it up, and they drove it over, dumped it out. They did it in
those.
Yeah, they're nice. He did it in 2 halves. So we poured half of the building in one pour one day, and then the other half the other day. Because the building is, I think it's 40. It's like 40 by 60.
Okay.
So it's 40 feet. So they did 40 feet and 40 by 30 one day and 40 by 30 the next day.
And you're in South Dakota, so I'm guessing this thing has some insulation in it.
Yeah. It needs. Yeah, you need some. We were talking about my house last night, and my house could use some.
All right, well, hit us up. What do you need help with? What's the house problem?
The house.
You were talking to Brian about it? What do you got, Brian?
Well, I like the question. I didn't give him an answer. I don't even know if I have the answer, but he's got, like he said earlier, he's got a 1920s bungalow, and he doesn't believe there's any insulation in the walls. He's got stucco on the outside and plaster on the inside.
Okay.
So, and he doesn't plan on doing any major renovations right now. So he was kind of like, is there a reasonable way to add some insulation to this or not?
Yeah, you could do cellulose. I've done cellulose. My house I don't have stucco on the outside, but I did cellulose in the walls. And even though I could have drilled from the outside, I chose to drill from the inside because it was, at the time, I wasn't going to touch the outside of the house. And it would have meant removing a lot of clapboards, which I would prefer to do rather than drilling holes through the clapboards and then trying to plug and patch and make it look good. So I opted instead for my indoor drywall skills, and I drilled holes, 2 holes in each. Did I do 2 holes in each bay or 1? I don't remember. Used a hole saw to a carbide tipped hole saw.
Okay.
Because you will blow through the first hole saw on the first hole.
That's plaster.
But the carbide one will last the whole job. Yeah, I have plaster. Plaster over wood lath. So I just bored the holes through, stuck the cellulose tube all the way inside the cavity, dense packed it and backed it out. And yes, energy experts will tell you, I use one of those do-it-yourself blowers you can get at the home center, and they will tell you, doesn't have enough. Those machines don't have enough power to truly dense pack a wall to the density that you need to hit for it to not settle over time. But I thought, well, I have nothing now, so if I fill it up and it settles an inch, isn't that still better than having nothing? So I did it, and I don't know, maybe it settled. I'm fine. That's fine with me, because I didn't have to hire anybody, and I was on the cheap back then. So then I just the way I sealed the inside was once I had the cellulose packed in the hole, I took and this worked with varying efficacy. I took spray foam and I filled up the void that I cut through the plaster. So I used it as like a spray foam plug. And I just let it expand in and be, into the room a little bit, and then I let it harden. I took a V-notch drywall or a tile setting trowel, and I just pressed it flat against the surface and used it in a sawing motion to trim that foam flush to the plaster. And then I just skim coated over the foam with a couple layers of joint compound and repaint, touch up paint or repainted those rooms and done.
And that's holding up?
Yeah,
and you didn't put any mesh tape over it or anything?
I don't think I did mesh tape.
Wow.
My original plan was to reuse. In some cases, maybe I did reuse those plugs that you get from the hole saw.
And then just skim over those.
Yeah, you can sort of plug it in there, and you can just kind of seal it in place with something to hold it, and then you can skim over it.
Wow.
There's I think 1 or 2 spots where if I'm looking, I can notice that I had I can see the plug, but that's really just a function of didn't put enough compound on those. That's not a function of it moving. I have no cracks, nothing like that. It was fine.
Yeah.
And the house is a lot more comfortable. What I don't have is storm windows. So I'm waiting on you. That's a project for this summer or winter. It's going to be to get those going on my house. But
which is an article that we're hoping that soon Ben is going to publish in Fine Homebuilding magazine.
You still have to go shoot it, right?
For a little bit. Yeah, hopefully this spring.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, Brent's like, no, probably not.
So Ben, tell me this, or tell our listeners this, since I already know. And Justin, tell Justin this.
All right, tell somebody.
Just tell someone. How is it that you came to restore a pool table that ended up in the White House?
Oh yeah, we started.
That's a little bit.
I'm giving you too much credit.
That's a little bit more credit than I deserve.
I'm going to give it to you anyway.
No, I before I did the window restoration, which is strange because I didn't do window work until about 4 years ago when I started the project.
Yeah,
but. Via Instagram, we all know that time stops about 4 years ago, or history stops about 4 years ago.
Yeah,
there wasn't anything before that. But in my prior life, I restored antique pool tables for a company that down in Lincoln, Nebraska, and from doing that and being kind of someone that does that, I ended up. There was a problem with a table that was at the White House. It's a Brunswick jewel built in about 1895, and the rail liners, which are underneath the cloth.
Yeah.
There's a piece of rubber that's glued onto a piece of wood that's attached to the rail.
Yeah, it's the little triangular bumpers.
Yeah,
right?
There's a triangular bumper, but then there's usually it's like a piece of poplar that is attached to those rails.
Okay.
There's a feather strip groove. There's a little piece of wood that gets pushed down that holds the cloth on the top. That's why you don't see any staples or anything on the top. It gets wrapped around and then either tacked or stapled on the bottom where you don't see it. That is attached to the rail, which is the part that the piece of wood that you see that has either the dots or the diamonds, the sights in the rails. That joint was separating, and was causing problems in the playability of the table, which is an interesting thing in its own right. The table being played on by the president, and playing games with I guess some of the Secret Service guys in some downtime. So because of that separation, when the ball is hitting the rail, it's coming off dead. It's not.
Oh, it's not bouncing.
Yeah, it's not bouncing. So they, at a time when the president was not at the White House, they went in, took the rails off.
Which presidency are we talking about here?
So this was the Obama presidency. Okay, but it's not Obama's pool table. It's the president of the United States' pool table. It's part of, and that was really interesting to learn about how that all kind of takes place. Each administration purchases is asked to and is allocated to purchase things.
Cool.
I think I'm no expert on this by any means, but I believe it's given to the first lady is allowed to decorate or maybe that's all wrong. I don't know. But they're asked to decorate or to purchase new things.
Yeah, right.
For the White House, and then they also are allowed to use like anything from past administrations. It's part of the White House. That's where you see like Lincoln's desk.
Sure. They have kind of like an archive of stuff.
Yeah, they have an archive of stuff, and then when the term is over, that stuff doesn't come with them. That doesn't go with them. That stays as part of the history of the American history.
Can't you just picture Obama like hustling the Secret Service guys?
And then he was having a hard time hustling, so he called Bennett.
Sure. Well, and
he's like, "Get me Brunick."
Did you or did you not fly on Marine One?
What I also thought was interesting, and I don't know if this is true or not true, but I had heard that there was a number of games that had been played, or between the second Bush, so George W. and Tony Blair.
Okay.
In the buildup of what are we going to do?
Sure.
You had the Iraq War, and what is I don't know if that's
rumor has it
that's rumor, and it's probably not true, but boy, it sounds like a good story.
Jeff, get AP News on the line. Just pass the story along.
So, so the pool table wasn't playing very well, and they sent them to me. There wasn't anything it was just there was some separation of a 100-year-old joint. So they sent it to me.
Pack it up and they send it to you.
Well, they sent the pool table rails to me. They didn't send the table. They just took the rails off, sent them to where I was working, and then I fixed the rails. We packaged them back up and sent them back.
Okay. So you didn't get to go to the White House?
I didn't get to go to the White House.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up the episode.
Yeah. It's my one claim to fame.
You can still go there on part of your. You just have to expand inland a little bit on your tour of the East Coast. You can still go to the White House if you want. I'm sure if you tell them,
they'll probably just take you right down for a game of pool.
Yeah,
sure,
the president.
Why not?
Yeah,
of course.
If you want to play pool with the president, I don't.
Hey.
Might be interesting. So, what did we forget to cover, Brian? What am I forgetting here? Oh, the sharpening. I wanted to hear about the sharpening that you guys just shot some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So you have kind of a, well, I don't really know what your techniques for sharpening. I've seen a little bit of it. I think it involves some diamond paste, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit irreverent from a woodworking point of view. So I was just curious if you could give us the very quick rundown of how you get your blades sharp.
Sure. Yeah, like I was telling Brian yesterday, it's pared down as I can possibly get it.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly enjoy sharpening.
No,
so that was another part of it.
Yeah,
I wanted something that was the quickest and was the easiest for me. And this was a system that I came up with. And also from working out at the Mead Building, the first couple of years that I worked there was no water. And there wasn't any heat either to begin with. So freezing was an issue. So water stones and that kind of thing was out.
Yep.
So I ended up picking up this diamond plate. I picked up the diamond plate, and then I had heard about diamond paste actually from the Fine Woodworking podcast. Brian Boggs who's somebody that contributes to them.
Yeah, a fantastic chair maker.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
beautiful work. He had talked about using diamond paste, and I was listening to that while I was mowing the lawn one day.
Yeah.
And thought, well, shoot, that sounds like a great idea. And so I picked up the diamond paste and ended up getting this diamond plate, mainly for the reason that I didn't need to have water with it, and I didn't have to flatten anything.
Yep.
It could just be a standalone thing.
Do you remember who makes that? The one you have?
Trend makes the one that I have. And
it's certain grit?
It's two-sided. It's 300 grit on one side and 1,000 grit on the other.
Okay.
But I don't know if those are kind of relative terms.
It doesn't. You can't really compare one to the other necessarily, like a Trend versus a a water stone even. Like the numbers don't necessarily correspond.
Yeah, they don't.
But it's just in case anybody's interested in following your system, I wanted to find out what you were using.
Yeah, it's that, and then there's a little bit of lapping fluid that they also sell, and I use what they sell, just because it's kind of expensive. I don't know if it's like $20 for a bottle, but a bottle lasts me for a long period of time. So I haven't found a need to hunt something else down that will do the lubricating of the stone. It's mainly to get the metal so it doesn't like just adhere down to the stone and kind of float away. It's just like one spray or two sprays of a little pump sprayer bottle. So that does the heavy lifting, that does the grinding of the bevel.
And you're putting it in just like an inexpensive little tool holder?
I just do it freehand.
Oh, freehand, okay.
Yeah, because I'm only doing just the very tip of it. I'm not doing like heavy grinding. If I were to do grinding, then we'd go over to a grinding wheel and grind it to get that
with the grinding wheel.
With the grinding wheel to get
sorry
to get the shape, and then I'm just doing like a micro bevel, just a small little spot, and I just I lay it down so the bevel is resting on the plate, and then I just pick it up a little bit,
okay,
and then pull it back, and it works fine for me. I think if you were to grind that whole bevel, then if you weren't going to use a grinding wheel and you're going to use that stone, which you can do, I think you would then want to put it in a honing guide, and rub it back and forth for a more consistent result. But for the little bit that I do, it doesn't seem to matter, and the time that it takes to put it in the honing guide, get it all straight, get the angle right, all of those things, I'm already done.
Yeah.
If I do it by hand.
So it starts with lapping it on the diamond, and then the paste comes after?
Yeah, the paste is just like a honing compound.
And what are you putting it on?
So I put it on pieces of MDF.
Oh, okay.
That seems to be the thing that works the best. I do have some metal plates that I picked up from Lee Valley, but it didn't seem to bed down into that metal plate. MDF worked the best. That was what I was using before, and I thought, well, I'll if I spend money, well, that obviously it's going to be better. If I buy something, it's going to be better. Well, it wasn't any better. In fact, I got better results with the MDF, and then they're, if you gouge them or do something to them, or they just get kind of filled up, then you toss them and put it.
It's good use for scraps.
Yeah. You always seem to have a piece of MDF floating around, or if you don't, you can go buy like a 2 foot by 2 foot.
Yeah.
Whatever those are at the big box store, and cut them up into pieces that are about the same size as that plate. And then, you've got a couple of pieces of MDF in that metal plate, and that's the whole system.
Wow. How many different grits of the paste?
Just I use 3. There's like 6 micron, 3 micron, and 1 micron. I go through those 3. I don't know if you need to go through those 3. You might be able to just do like 3 micron, catch it in the middle. A lot of the times, I think even off of that diamond plate, it was probably good enough for a lot of applications.
Yeah,
it's a matter of how far do you need to take it.
Yeah,
wants and needs.
And who makes that paste?
It's Dia paste from DMT.
Oh yeah, yep, DMT. Okay. That's a pretty common.
Yeah, I've gotten mine. The ones that I've gotten from Lee Valley.
Okay.
And they're little. They look like little syringes. Just use a small amount. I don't know. I've used those for 3-4 years now, and you saw how much there's. Yeah. There's a whole bunch left in them.
Yeah.
I've only used a couple of little.
Yeah, he only puts like barely a pea-sized bead out on the MDF, and spreads it around.
Spread it around with the back of a chisel, so that the chisel won't absorb anything. So it just smears it and embeds it into the MDF, and then it's kind of like a leather strop, but because it's a hard surface, it doesn't radius that edge like leather can. Leather can dub.
Yeah.
if you on a small scale, it can kind of round over the edge.
Yeah.
This won't round over the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool system. We're gonna take you right through it in a couple issues.
What did you guys sharpen? A chisel?
We did a chisel and we did a plane blade.
Cool.
Yeah.
But we never found out what a joggle was. I just realized that you were talking about earlier.
That's the name of that horn.
Oh, the part that sticks out.
Yeah, the fancy name is joggle.
Joggle.
Yeah.
Horn is what the majority of people would call it. But if you look back in, on terminology of sash, you'll see that they're called joggles. So if you want to sound fancy,
dig up a picture of a joggle and put it on the video for us. Well, it's been an exciting day. We figured out what a joggle was.
We nailed that.
We heard about Ben's shop. We what else did we find out here? His system for sharpening.
We learned about the pool table in the White House.
We found out that if you want to make money, you have to make money. What was that?
You need someone to pay you. Greatest tip. That tip was worth the price of the podcast.
Yeah, which is free, by the way. Nobody pays us. Well, listen, we're gonna let you get back to your travels, but we appreciate you swinging by, and hopefully, people have been good to you here and taking care of you, and we want you to keep writing for us, and hopefully you can swing back in at some point, or we'll get you on the phone and talk to you about your future projects when those articles come out. We're also going to throw up all of Ben's contact information, for his Instagram, which is Chalkstone Woodworking.
Yeah.
We'll get you some. We'll have Mike put up some photos from that, from your feed, and a connection back to your page so people can check you out. And also some links to the articles you've done for us. That's at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. And as you guys know, you can always get in touch with us at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. We've got Martin Holliday coming in soon in the next week or two. He's going to be swinging in for an episode, so we're going to be doing some energy questions again.
Get your energy questions in. Martin's the man to answer those.
And much more to come. So, Ben, thanks for swinging by, and that's going to wrap us up. I am Justin, the host, and I'm here with, and this is Brian and Ben, both saying bye.
Bye. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, keep craft alive, and happy building. Might have been the weirdest ending I've ever done.